They kept pushing their snow into my driveway, and at first I told myself it was just how winter worked around here. You know, plows pass, snow piles up, nobody really owns where it lands. But after a while it stopped feeling like winter and started feeling personal. And the thing is, I'm not the kind of guy who goes looking for trouble, but I'm the kind of guy who doesn't like being quietly pushed around, especially not on my own property. I live on the edge of a small town upstate, the kind of place where winters aren't just a season, they're a full-blown event. My driveway runs right along a narrow private road that leads into a condo complex next door. Nothing fancy, just a cluster of neat little units with matching mailboxes and a management board that likes to pretend everything runs smoothly. For the most part, we all kept to ourselves. A wave here, a nod there. No drama. At least, that's how it used to be. The first snowstorm of that year hit hard, but clean. One of those early season dumps that makes everything look peaceful for about 10 minutes before reality sets in. I woke up early, grabbed my shovel, and went out to clear the driveway. At the end of it, right where it meets the road, there was a ridge, maybe a foot high, packed tight. Nothing unusual. That's what happens when the town plow comes through. It rolls the snow right to the edges, leaves you with a little wall to break through. I chipped away at it, took maybe 10 minutes, got on with my day. Didn't think twice. Second storm came a week later, heavier, wetter, the kind of snow that doesn't fluff up, it compacts. I stepped outside and just stopped for a second, because that ridge, it wasn't a ridge anymore. It was a wall, 2 feet high, dense, almost like someone had poured concrete across the mouth of my driveway. I remember standing there, shovel in hand, just staring at it like, how did this even happen? It took me close to an hour to clear enough space to get my car out. My back was already starting to complain, gloves soaked through, breath fogging up in the cold, and somewhere in the middle of all that, I started noticing something that hadn't clicked before. The angle of the pile, the way it curved, it didn't line up with the street. It lined up with the private road next to my place. I didn't jump to conclusions right away. I mean, it's snow, it moves, it shifts, wind plays tricks. But the thought stuck with me. So the next time it snowed, I paid attention. Not from outside, not obvious, just standing by the window with a cup of coffee, watching. That's when I saw him. The condo complex had their own plow service, a guy driving a mid-sized truck with a front blade, nothing city-issued, just private contract work. He came down their lane, clean, efficient, pushing everything to one side like he'd done it 1,000 times. And then, right at the end, where their road meets mine, he slowed down, angled the blade, and dumped the entire load straight across the edge of my driveway. I remember blinking, like maybe I misunderstood what I was seeing. But then he backed up, adjusted, and did it again, clearing their entrance perfectly, while mine turned into a barrier. I set the mug down and just stood there for a second, feeling that slow, familiar heat of irritation starting to build. Not explosive, just steady, because now it made sense. That wasn't random. That was deliberate, or at the very least, convenient for him and inconvenient for me. Next storm, I went outside and waited. He showed up right on schedule. Same truck, same routine. Cleared their lane, smooth as ever. And as he approached the end, I stepped forward, right into his line of sight. He hesitated, rolled the window down. Hey, I said, keeping it calm. You mind not pushing that into my driveway? He leaned slightly out, one arm resting on the door, looking at me like I'd just asked him to redesign the whole road. I'm just following the push line, he said. Easiest way to clear it. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I get that. But that's my driveway you're blocking. He shrugged, casual, almost bored. Snow's gotta go somewhere. Everyone does it like this. That line, it stuck with me. Everyone does it like this. Like that somehow made it okay. Well, I said, a little firmer now, don't do it here. Find another place. He gave me a short nod, not quite agreeing, not quite dismissing, just enough to end the conversation. Then he rolled the window up, shifted the truck, and drove off. For a moment, I thought that was it. Simple. You say something, it gets fixed. That's how it's supposed to work, right? Yeah, not quite. Because the next storm rolled in, and that wall came back. Bigger. Heavier. Like our conversation never happened at all. The thing about small annoyances is they don't stay small for long, especially when they repeat. One time, you shrug it off. 2 times, you start questioning it. By the third, it's not about snow anymore, it's about respect. And standing there, staring at that fresh wall of packed ice at the end of my driveway. I realized this wasn't just some lazy plow pattern. It was a choice. Maybe not a malicious one at first, but definitely a consistent one. I cleared it again, slower this time, more deliberate, like I was trying to read the snow itself for answers. The way it had been pushed, the direction, the layers, and every detail pointed back to that same spot, that same angle, that same truck. My shoulders ached halfway through, and I remember stopping, leaning on the shovel, just exhaling into the cold like, all right, if talking to the driver didn't work, then maybe it was time to go one level up. That afternoon, I walked over to the condo office. It sat right at the front of their complex, a small building with a glass door and one of those bulletin boards filled with neatly pinned notices about parking rules and holiday decorations. Inside, it smelled faintly like coffee and cleaning supplies. Behind the desk was a woman in her 50s, sharp haircut, calm expression, the kind of person who's used to dealing with complaints and already has her answers lined up. "Hi," I said, brushing snow off my jacket. "I live next door, along the private road. I wanted to talk about your plow service." She looked up, polite but measured. "Of course. Is there an issue?" "Yeah," I said, keeping my tone even. "Your driver's been pushing snow directly into my driveway. It's been happening every storm." She tilted her head slightly, like she was considering it, but not really buying it. "Our contractor is very experienced," she said. "He's been with us for years. It's unlikely he would intentionally block a resident's access." I let that sit for a second. "I'm not saying it's intentional," I replied, "but it's happening. I've watched it." She gave a small, sympathetic smile, the kind that feels more like a dismissal wrapped in courtesy. "It's more likely the municipal plow. They tend to create those ridges at intersections." There it was, the easy explanation. The kind that closes the conversation without actually solving anything. "I thought that too," I said. "But this lines up with your road, not the main street." She nodded slowly, already moving toward ending the discussion. "I'll make a note of it. But I'm confident our contractor is following proper procedures." And just like that, conversation over. Walking back to my place, I could feel that irritation shifting into something more focused. Not anger exactly, more like clarity. Because now I knew I wasn't dealing with a misunderstanding. I was dealing with a system that had already decided I was the easier inconvenience. So I decided to make it harder to ignore. Before the next storm, I went out and bought a set of bright orange driveway markers, tall, flexible stakes that you can't miss, even in heavy snowfall. I spaced them carefully along the edge of my driveway, right where it met their road. Every inch of that line was clearly on my property. There was no ambiguity, no guesswork. You'd have to actively choose to cross it. When the storm came, I didn't even bother grabbing a shovel right away. I made coffee, stood by the window again, and waited. Sure enough, the truck showed up. Same driver. Same routine. He cleared their lane, pushing snow neatly along the side, working his way down like clockwork. And as he approached my driveway, I felt this weird mix of anticipation and disbelief, like part of me still expected him to adjust, to notice the markers and go, "All right, got it." He slowed down. I saw it clearly. The truck eased forward, blades slightly lifted, like he was considering it. And then he angled it. Not by accident. Not because he didn't see the stakes. He saw them, and pushed right through them anyway. Snow rolled over those bright orange markers, burying half of them, spilling across my driveway entrance like nothing had changed. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so blatant it almost felt absurd. "Okay," I muttered to myself, watching from the window. "So that's how we're doing this." That moment changed something. Up until then, I was still giving the benefit of the doubt, still treating it like a fixable issue. But seeing him ignore something that obvious, that deliberate, it flipped a switch. Because now it wasn't just inconvenience. It was disregard. And once you recognize that, you stop asking politely. I didn't confront him again. Not right away. There's a point where repeating yourself stops being productive, and you start needing something else, something concrete. So I set up a camera. Nothing fancy. Just a small, weatherproof unit mounted near my garage, angled toward the driveway and the edge of the road. It wasn't about surveillance, it was about proof. Because conversations can be brushed off, memories can be questioned, but footage? That's harder to ignore. The next storm came and went. Then another. And each time, same pattern. He'd clear their entire lane, smooth and efficient. then pivot at the end and unload everything right where my driveway met the road. Clean entrance for them. Snow wall for me. Over and over again, like a routine he didn't even think twice about. After the second recorded storm, I went inside, sat down at my desk, and watched the footage. Not just once, the few times. Frame by frame in some spots. You could see it clearly, the approach, the angle, the push. It wasn't random. It wasn't wind. It wasn't the city plow. It was him. I pulled a few still images, the clearest ones. His truck mid-turn, the blade angled, snow rolling directly across my markers. You could practically draw a line from his lane into my driveway. Then I wrote an email. Kept it simple. Attached the screenshots. Explained the situation, again. No accusations, no attitude, just facts. I even included timestamps. I hit send and waited. A day passed. Nothing. 2 days. Still nothing. By the end of the week, I had my answer. Not through words, but through silence. And sometimes, silence says more than anything else. That's when the whole thing stopped being about getting them to fix it and started becoming about how I was going to handle it myself. Because if they were going to keep treating my driveway like an extension of their snow storage, then maybe it was time I treated their property the same way. And that's when I started thinking, not about complaints, not about emails, but about solutions they couldn't ignore. I didn't come up with the idea all at once. It kind of formed slowly, the way most practical decisions do, piece by piece, while I was out there dealing with the problem again. Because that's the thing. Every time they pushed snow into my driveway, they weren't just dumping inconvenience. They were handing me material. And one evening, standing there with my snowblower idling beside me, looking at that heavy pile they'd just left behind, it finally clicked in a way that felt almost too simple. If they wanted to move snow, I could move snow too. Now, I'm not talking about doing something reckless or destructive. I wasn't trying to start a war. I just wanted balance, something that made the situation visible in a way emails and conversations hadn't. And the tool sitting in my garage was more than capable of making that point. It's a gas-powered snowblower, not the little electric kind, the kind you use when winter actually means business. It can chew through packed snow, ice chunks, even those dense plow ridges, and send it flying 30 feet if you aim it right. I'd bought it a couple years back after a particularly brutal winter, thinking it was overkill at the time. Turns out, it was exactly what I needed. So I waited. Not for another storm. That part was guaranteed, but for the right moment after it. The next snowfall came down heavy, steady through the afternoon, and right on schedule, their plow showed up. Same routine, same angle, same result. By early evening, their lot was clean, cars neatly lined up, everything looking the way they liked it, and at the edge of my driveway sat that familiar wall of snow, thick and compact, like it had been stamped into place. I let it sit there for a while. Had dinner, took my time. There's something about not rushing that changes the tone of what you're about to do. It stops being reactionary and starts feeling intentional. Around 8 p.m., when things were quiet, I stepped outside. Cold air hit sharp, the kind that makes everything sound a little clearer. I rolled the snowblower out, primed it, pulled the cord, and it roared to life, steady and loud in the stillness. For a second, I just stood there, hands on the handles, looking at that pile like, all right, let's do this properly. I started at the edge, easing into it, letting the machine bite into the packed snow. It handled it easily, chewing through layers that had taken me nearly an hour with a shovel before. And as the chute began to throw snow out in long, clean arcs, I aimed it, not at random, not at anything that would cause damage, just back across the line it came from. Each pass was controlled, deliberate. I worked the pile down methodically, sweeping left to right, sending everything they'd pushed into my driveway right back onto the empty edge of their lot, along their snowbank line where it blended in with the rest of what they'd cleared earlier. No cars hit, no walkways blocked, just redistribution. And I'll be honest, there was a certain rhythm to it that felt oddly satisfying. Not in a petty way, but in that quiet, balanced way where things finally start making sense again. Like correcting a tilt you didn't realize had been bothering you until it was gone. It took about 40 minutes. By the time I finished, my driveway entrance was clear, cleaner than it had been all winter, and the edge of their lot looked different. Not wrecked, not messy, just tighter. Like the space they thought they had suddenly wasn't quite as generous. I shut the machine off, and the silence came back just as quickly as it had left. For a moment, I stood there, looking at the result, breath steady, shoulders relaxed for the first time in a while. Then I went inside. The next morning, I didn't even need to look out the window to know something had changed. I could hear it. The low rumble of that same plow truck, back again, earlier than usual. When I did step outside later, the evidence was clear. He'd had to redo the edges of their lot, push things back, make room again. The neat, easy finish from the night before was gone. That afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I picked up. "Hi, this is Karen from the Ridgeview Condo Association." Her tone was different this time. Still controlled, but not as certain. "I wanted to ask," she continued, "have you been moving snow onto our property?" I leaned back slightly, letting a small pause sit there. Not to be dramatic, just to make sure we were actually having the conversation this time. "I've been moving snow," I said, "that was pushed into my driveway, back to where it came from." There was a brief silence on the line. Not confusion, more like recalibration. "Well," she said finally, a little softer now, "that's creating additional work for our contractor." I almost smiled at that. Not out of spite, just at the clarity of it. "Yeah," I replied, "it created additional work for me too. That's kind of the point." Another pause, longer this time. And then her tone shifted again, less defensive, more practical. "What would you like us to do?" she asked. That question, that was the moment everything had been leading to. Not the snowblower, not the footage, just that simple shift from dismissal to engagement. "I want your driver to stop using my driveway as a dump site," I said. "And I want that in writing, so there's no confusion next time it snows." She agreed, quicker than I expected, honestly. But before we wrapped up, I added one more thing, not aggressively, just clearly. "And if it keeps happening," I said, "I'll start billing for snow removal. Because at that point, I'm doing part of your job." That landed. You could hear it. We ended the call on that note. No raised voices, no drama. Just terms. And after that, things changed. The next storm came, and I watched again, same as before. The truck rolled down their lane, blade pushing snow cleanly to the side. But as it approached my driveway, something different happened. He adjusted. Subtle, but clear. The blade angled the other way, sending the snow away from my property instead of into it. No wall. No ridge. Just a clean, open entrance. I stood there for a second, almost waiting for the catch, but there wasn't one. It stayed that way. Storm after storm, the pattern held. My driveway stayed clear. Their lot stayed organized. And the whole situation, which had dragged on for weeks, resolved itself the moment it stopped being one-sided. Funny thing is, nothing about the snow changed. Same storms, same equipment, same space. The only difference was direction. And I've thought about that more than once since then, how a lot of problems look like that's just how things are, until someone pushes back, just enough to make the cost visible. Now, here's where I'm curious what you think. Because some people I've told this to say I handled it exactly right, fair, measured, no damage done. Others say I escalated it, that I could have kept pushing through official channels instead of, well, returning the favor. So I'll ask you, was it justified? Or did I cross a line the moment I decided to solve it my own way? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you've ever dealt with something like this, neighbors, shared spaces, those little not my problem situations that slowly become your problem, I'd actually like to hear how you handled it. And yeah, if you enjoy stories like this, real situations, real choices, the kind that don't always have a clean answer, hit subscribe. There's plenty more where this came from.